Hello, folks, and welcome back to True Crime Phenomenon. Our phenom of the week is Scott Peterson, and this is episode number 7, Reasonable Doubt. Now, this episode is based on the final episode of the A&E series, The Murder of Laci Peterson. And the episode opens up with Lee Peterson, and he's called into the Larry King show, and he's chastising Nancy Grace. And he basically says to her, look, there's no room for innocent until proven guilty within your sphere. And I think the thing that frustrates me the most about Nancy Grace is for all the good things that she does, because she does do some good, she shines light on subjects that need to be shined, but then she ignores potential facts. And the way that she is, if she believes somebody is guilty, then she's going to hang them by their fingernails. There's just no two ways about it. It's sad. I think in this modern media, it's hard to get a fair trial these days. A lot of these cases are typically tried in local media, but when you have a case that's like this, where it's just so bizarre that it makes the mainstream. And this was, like we talked about before, this is a time when media is going from, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock news to 24/7, 365 days a year. We dealt with this in Scott Peterson trial, Casey Anthony, even O.J. Simpson to some extent, but not to this extent. So the trial coverage, I think the greatest injustice that was done here was doing it without cameras in the courtroom due to the exposure that the case got, because people got a very different point of view from what was going on in the courtroom to what was going on outside of the courtroom. And this was reinforced to the jurors. I mean, you can't help but know that they're being constantly pummeled by people outside of the courthouse, on TV, in the newspapers, constantly in their subconscious, whether they know it or not. They're constantly being fed data that says Scott is guilty. Now, if you've been through this series with me, you know that I did not go into this being a Scott Peterson advocate whatsoever. And one thing that I think is important is having an open mind enough, or being open-minded enough to be able to change your mind. And I think that's one of the greatest problems that we've talked about before plaguing this country is people get themselves into this echo chamber and they don't change. They have this inability to change their minds. And one thing I've tried to do is be objective throughout this entire process. And one thing that I've learned is my own biases. I had my own biases going into this, and I had to check those at the door. And I feel like I've done a pretty good job at that. There's still a lot of things that bother me about Scott, but judicially, I don't believe he's guilty. And that's just something that bothers me. Now, Nancy would say that, what I believe to be true, what I believe to be true is what I present. And Lee basically says you should be ashamed of yourself for jumping to these conclusions, because she really does jump to a lot of conclusions. She takes little anecdotes, little anecdotal evidence, puts them together and says, okay, that automatically assumes this person's guilty, while completely ignoring the rest of the facts. And I don't think the media really helped the police in this case, because the police were so focused on Scott because that's what the media is beating into their brain. You've got detectives that are coming out as soon as the verdict comes out, saying justice was served and so on and so forth. Nancy to this day still believes Scott is guilty, by the way. And then you got juror number 4. He likes to talk a lot. It's like juror number 8. His name is Mike Belmessieri, something like that. And one of the things he said was the timeline that we drew up suggested Scott had enough time to kill Laci. Keep in mind, this is the same juror that comes out of the jury room right after convicting Scott, talking about book deals, right? Imagine if he had voted to acquit Scott. Would he have gotten a book deal? Would he be talking about book deals? Would he be making money off this case? Probably not. But it's what he does. And it's what the rest of the jurors do. Right? So, if I don't know if you remember Detective Brocchini, but Brocchini immediately was suspicious of Scott. And, people are asking him after the fact, and he said, I just had a gut feeling that things aren't right. Well, you can't trust your gut because your gut can be wrong. You have to stick with the facts. And that's, it's a shame. I think, the body recovery was really the end to Scott. Brocchini actually says, the body recovery was when he wanted to go pick Scott up. That's when he said, okay, he's guilty 100%. Forget the fact that we've blasted his alibi to the media. So anybody who's listening could potentially drop the body right where Scott was. I mean, it just sounds so silly to have an alibi that you're in the bay where you dump somebody. I mean, Scott's not the brightest person in the world, but I don't think he's that stupid. Just so stupid. Now, where we left off in the closing arguments before the jury went to actually adjudicate this, the prosecution at their closing arguments conceded that they didn't know when or where or how this crime was committed. Think about that. Let it sink in. They didn't know where. They don't know if it was the house, the shop, the car, or the truck at the bay. They don't know where this happened because they were never able to find any forensic evidence. They don't know where. They don't know when, because they had a timeline that it was the night before. Because even the police knew that Scott did not have enough time with all of the evidence to kill Scott to kill Lacey on Christmas Eve. They didn't know where, they didn't know when, and they didn't know how. Now, the recovered body, they weren't able to say that she was strangled because that was their theory. They absolutely did not know that. All they knew was that she was dead. And they weren't able to get any forensic evidence from the body that lent to their theory. Excuse me. Now, the appeal was filed in 2012, and it starts making its way through the system. Right? There's lots and lots of case files to review. I think we talked about this before. Just in the discovery alone, there's over 30,000 documents. Right? And the appeal was based on 3 different areas. Number 1 was jury selection. Number 2 was evidence that should never have been admitted. And then number 3 was on excluded evidence. Now, any juror going into this courtroom that opposed the death penalty were automatically excused by the judge. So think about that. Anybody who might be against the death penalty was automatically removed from the courtroom because it was a capital case. Now, they should have asked, okay, are you willing to overlook your own personal biases to give a fair judgment on the death penalty? And that's a completely different statement. Like in me in particular, I am not for the death penalty. I'm not a death penalty person. I don't think 2 wrongs make a right. And I don't believe that spending millions and millions of dollars on all the automatic appeals and habeas corpus and so on that they get is worth the money. I'd rather just imprison these people. There are extenuating circumstances like Ted Bundy and, cases like that I think are extra gruesome that need the death penalty. But I'd rather just see people rot in prison for the rest of their lives to think about what they've done. So they essentially, the prosecution essentially just took the evidence and threw whatever they could against the wall to see what would stick. Okay, so they had a hydrologist, was one of the pieces of evidence that they're kind of looking at, had 0 experience with body movement from tides, and he never studied this either. So he has 0 experience. and you have him testifying about the tides and about how if Lacey's body is dumped here, how it could end up here and how Connor's body could end up here, when he had zero experience. Why was he allowed to testify about tides when he knows nothing about them? Just bizarre, 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 bizarre. The other thing is the boat experiment was excluded. Now, if you remember from the previous episodes, Mark Garagos went and got the exact same boat, replicated kind of the conditions out on the San Francisco Bay, and they sunk the boat every time they tried to take this was just 100 pounds, not including the 5 8-pound anchors that were tied to Lacey. So Lacey was approximately 130 to 150 pounds, adding the 5 8-pound weights that they say were made, it's an additional 40 pounds. So what's that, 170 to 190 pounds? Okay, so they're using almost half of the body weight, 60% of the body weight. And it's sunk every time using dead weight. It's a 14-foot boat, not a big boat. So this evidence was excluded. However, they still let in all this other nonsense from people with no background, and like a hydrologist, no background in body movement with tides. Okay. Now, keep in mind, capital cases do automatically get an appeal. They also get habeas corpus proceedings, allowing investigators to investigate new avenues that have not been pursued. Okay, and there was actually a significant amount of evidence that was found. Now, there's two different avenues I think that they could go with this. One would be a Brady violation, which means it was intentionally withheld. And then one is just, completely reintroducing new evidence that was overlooked during the original trial. It's something I'm going to get a little bit more into as we go further, but you'll learn that there were 10 crucial pages that were apparently caught in a copier that never made it to the defense. Okay, that, if it was willfully done, is a clear Brady violation. And I think that's what the statute says, is you have to purposely not hand over pieces of evidence. Now, just based on that fact alone, it should be a new trial because there's some pretty damning evidence in there. Okay, so the evidence basically shows that the trial wasn't fair. I guess that's the point I'm getting at. Now, his new attorneys agreed to come in and kind of take an objective look at the case, which is what any good attorney would do. November 2016, San Diego, California. Scott's still on death row at the time this is being made. Family is getting together to support the appeal with other people who support Scott. And they call them the SPA weekends, Scott Peterson appeal. So they would do these weekends where they would all get together in this group, Scott's family, as well as these other bloggers and different people, people that were on the message boards during this time that believed that the state did not have enough evidence to convict him. So this is important to review all of the evidence to make sure, are there any holes whatsoever? How can we help? They weren't going to be caught unawares this time. And essentially what they're trying to do is prepare for a new trial and just be ready at any moment that this could happen. Unlike before, they were not ready for the trial. So one of the things they go over is, Scott's location. Scott chose the south side of Brooks Island in off the Berkeley Marina in the San Francisco Bay because it had shallow waters, and that just seems like a foolish place to be dumping a body in shallow water area. It's stupid, right? And another thing they cover is that the alibi was publicized by media, police, and they actually go to the scene and they see all the different entrances to get alongside of the bay. And there's really, you didn't actually need a boat to be able to accomplish this task. So all these different entrances, all these different ways you can get within a couple feet of the water and do what you need to do. Now, anybody that knows that area knows that's very true. Anybody can get in there and do what they want. You don't need a boat. You can drive right down to the water and you can do what needs to be done. Now, another thing that I thought was interesting, which I haven't covered before, was there was twine and tape found on the body of Connor. There was tape on the ear and twine around the neck, and the twine had about 2 centimeters of slack. Okay, so God only knows what actually happened to Connor, but with 2 centimeters of slack means it was done intentionally, which means the body was out of Lacey. Connor was born, or Connor was removed. However you want to put that, Connor was not in Lacey, because that's the only way that this electrical tape and the twine could end up on Connor, in my opinion. Now, especially with 2 centimeters of slack, it doesn't seem right. Something is weird here. So he's potentially handled outside of the womb. Okay. Now, another thing is the Peterson home is, kind of characterizes this, quiet suburban town, and then when you actually go and look at Modesto, so I'm from Northern California, very familiar with Modesto, very familiar with its reputation. It's close to Stockton, one of the most dangerous cities in America. One of the things they say about Stockton is murder, meth, and auto theft, a common thing known about Modesto. Now, there's little pockets of kind of crime-ridden area. This one particular area, which is right across the street from the main thoroughfare that kind of goes into Scott's neighborhood, Scott and Lacey's neighborhood, it's called the airport area. It's the roughest area in Modesto. It's really dark, rough, drugs, gangs, all that stuff. Now, there was a little bit of satanic panic and cult theories that were kind of going around, and Modesto PD started to investigate the cult theory. It was actually Modesto PD, right? Because from 1999 to 2002, 7 pregnant women disappeared from the area, 3 of them from Modesto, and 4 within 80 miles. And 1, Hernandez, was 6 months pregnant. Okay, and washed up in the Bay Area, missing limbs and missing a head, very similar to exactly what happened to Lacey. So I understand why this would be investigated, but they never went anywhere with it. Now, Matt Dalton actually investigated this. He was the local guy that actually lived in Modesto during the trial, worked for Garagos, and he kind of describes this as the greatest injustice of his career. And he would show pictures and evidence to anybody that would listen, and people were just tone deaf. They didn't want to hear it. Nobody wants to hear that Scott Peterson could possibly be innocent. Possibly people even listening to this. I know I didn't. I didn't want to hear that Scott could be innocent. He's not innocent. The media told me what to think. That's one mindset that we need to get out of. So we need to stop allowing the media to tell us what to think. If we've learned anything over these last 4 to 5 years, is that the media is going to lie to you. I won't say 100% of the time, but I would say at least 50% of the time, the media is going to lie and distort the truth, always to fit their narrative. Now, sometimes things just fit their narrative, so they run with it. Okay, so the airport district right next to the Peterson house on the 23rd of December had 6 incidents next to their home. The first incident was a burglary attempt. Second one was the Medina burglary, which was right across the street from Scott. Third was another burglary attempt. The fourth one was a kidnapping attempt. The fifth one was another burglary. And the sixth one was the Lourdes Avila kidnapping attempt. Okay, so now these are all felonies, 6 felonies that occurred. Now, Lourdes Avila was 8 months pregnant. And on December 24th, 2002, at 11:15 a.m., Florida saw an older car, which keep in mind the older car, because it's the same thing you hear out in front of Lacey and Scott's house as well, along with a van. So an older car with suspicious people driving the car, and they were parked across the street 30 minutes watching her. So they're watching her closely, and she got scared. She owned a little small business, and she goes inside of her business. And in her mind, what she said, they look like killers and criminals. They just had this really scary look to her. She was terrified. And one of the guys actually came into her store. Oh, she's 8 months pregnant, just like Lacey. So what she did is she hid in the back and called 911. Now, so this totally traumatized her, right? As well as Lacey's abduction, completely traumatized her. And her daughter was actually born on Connor's due date. I mean, what a coincidence that is. My goodness. And only Matt Dalton questioned her. No police actually questioned her in relation to the Lacey Peterson case. You know, she says that she doesn't have an opinion about Scott, but she still has dreams about what happened to Lacey as well as what happened to her. But she was terrified. Now, Sharon Rocha was interviewed on several different TV shows, and she said that it was a normal thing for Lacey to take her dog for a walk in the morning. So for Lacey to be out taking the dog for a walk was completely normal. She did it nearly every day. Now, Detective Grogan testified that the Lacey sightings of her walking the dog was not a priority. If you remember, there were 11 different people that saw Lacey, right? So we're going to get a little bit more in depth into some of the evidence that's come to light after the case, because it's just absolutely crazy. Now, police would say in press conferences that they were unable to verify or confirm that Lacey was walking her dog. Reports she was walking her dog, but follow-up didn't corroborate that, is what they said, which is not true because they didn't follow up on it. Now, from 9:50 to 10:08 a.m., Lacey is supposedly already dead in Scott's truck, according to the police. At 10:18, the neighbor, Karen Service, sees the Peterson's dog, Mackenzie, in the Peterson's front yard, and it has a collar and a leash on. Okay, so if Scott killed her, why would he put the collar and the leash on and throw the dog out in the front yard? I mean, did Scott kill her while she was walking the dog? It makes no sense. Why would that scenario take place? Unless he was trying to maybe set that up. I get it. But Karen had a receipt from a store called Austin's that corroborated her timeline. The receipt said 10:34 a.m. She found that receipt, retraced her steps to narrow down the time. And 10:18 was the very latest time she could have seen the dog. Okay, so that's how she narrowed it down, the very latest. So it could have even been earlier. Now, like I said, she had a receipt to confirm that timeline. Now, people saw Lacey after 10:18. She was seen by a nurse at 10:45, contradicting Karen's timeline, unless both things are true. And how could both things be true? Well, we're going to get into that. Now, Karen said it was common for the dog to be in the front yard with muddy paws from the front lawn. This was a common occurrence. This wasn't something that just happened that day. This was something that happened often. Now, if you know anything about pregnant women, they are constantly going to the bathroom. So, maybe she put the leash on the dog got out the gate, she put the dog right back behind the gate, going to the restroom. I mean, this is just what happens in a pregnant woman's life. Now, he had muddy paws from the front lawn. Now, there were 10 pages that were missed in the discovery. And in these 10 pages, which the police had these 10 pages, so they knew exactly what they said. They just chose to ignore it. Now, in those notes were notes from the mailman witness. Now, the mailman had the most accurate timeline because he had to scan electronically each and every parcel he dropped. Now, from 10:35 to 10:50 a.m., the letter carrier scanned his route time. So he was in that area from 10:35 to 10:50, and he said the gate was open and the dog was not barking like usual. Now, if you know anything about mail carriers, they know every dog on the block because every dog barks at them. And apparently Mackenzie was known for barking at the mail carrier every single day. And like normal, the dog did not bark at him. Okay, so the dog obviously wasn't there. So what could have happened between these times? What I think is, like I said, Lacey was probably going to the restroom. Mackenzie got out of the gate, which happened often, as Karen says. This is Karen's words, not my words, not Josh's words, Karen's words. Karen puts the dog back, whatever, 10 to 10:18 a.m., anytime in there. Lacey finishes her business, comes out, grabs the dog, goes for a walk. While she's walking the dog, between 10:35 and 10:50 a.m. is when the mail carrier drops the mail at the Peterson house, and the dog is not barking at him. If the dog was there, the dog would have barked, like when Scott got home and the dog was there. Okay, so if the mailman was correct, then Lacey was seen at 10:45, which makes all of the evidence fit and makes everything Scott's saying fit. So it makes the neighbor Karen correct. It makes all of the numerous sightings of Lacey true. Now, if all of these witnesses are telling the truth, which I believe they are, they've got no reason to lie. They've got no skin in the game. If all of these witnesses are truthful, then Scott is innocent based on the police theory. So now these facts actually put the Medina burglary into play, right? Because there's zero blood evidence, there's no scratches, there's no cleanup, there's no forensics, there's nothing to indicate that there was any crime committed at the Peterson home. Now, 516 Covina is the likely abduction point. Okay, Diane Jackson, the neighbor, saw a burglary on the 24th at the Medina house. On the 24th, not the 26th, on the 24th. Saw three men. They were shorter with darker skin, standing in front of a van or standing behind a van with the doors open. Okay, they stopped what they're doing as she drove past and just stared at her. Now, the police acknowledged and came out after the burglars and said it was the 26th of December. After the burglars said it was the 26th of December, the police just basically went with their timeline and said, okay, great, 26th of December, no problem, because it fit their narrative. They didn't investigate whether that was true. They just said they did. Now, they said they'd taken the safe out of the house and put it on the front lawn and picked it up later. Okay, so if it was 11:15 on the 26th, when there was news media out in front of the Peterson home, there would be some film of them picking up the safe. If this story were true, then we would know it because there would be some sort of evidence to back that up. But there is zero evidence for a robbery on the 26th. All the evidence points to the 24th. Every last bit of evidence regarding this robbery. Now, it only gets worse from here for the prosecution. Absolutely was not possible for there to be a robbery taking place with all of this type of interaction with a van parked out in front of the house, three strange men dropping a safe on the front lawn and picking up later. It's not possible for all these things to have happened without somebody seeing it. Now, the jurors never heard any of this evidence. Now, the police theory was inconsistent with the statements from Diane Jackson, with the mailman, and with all these other witnesses that saw Laci. It doesn't fit their narrative. It doesn't fit their theory. And the jury didn't hear this evidence. They didn't hear one piece of it. Now, Stephen Todd was convicted of burglary. He actually ended up, I think he took a plea deal. And the first thing he said when they're interviewing was, "I had nothing to do with that pregnant girl." First thing the detective says, "I'm not here to talk to you about the pregnant girl. I'm here to talk about the burglary." And no questions were asked about Laci. None, zero. They just took their word for it. When do police ever take a criminal's word for anything? It's bizarre. It's beyond bizarre. Our jury heard none of this evidence, none. Now, the defense received a letter from an inmate in Modesto County Jail that had information about the burglary across the street. He gave the name Sean Tenbrink, and Lieutenant Aponte had actually sent a tip to the Modesto PD. So they actually went to the logs and saw the tips and saw Lieutenant Aponte's tip from the Modesto Police Department, where he overheard a conversation with his brother Adam, Sean's brother Adam, and a friend of Stephen Todd. Now, Adam said Laci confronted them. Laci confronted them. They threatened her. And then the guy brings up Laci's name and he starts screaming, "Shut up, shut up, shut up. This could be monitored or recorded. Shut up." Immediately stopped the conversation. Well, good thing Aponte was actually taping the conversation. Lieutenant Aponte at the Modesto County Jail was taping the conversation. Now, he called a couple times over to the tip line, leaving the tip, and he gave a copy of this tape to the Modesto PD. Modesto PD says they don't have it. What happened to the tape? Why didn't we hear from Lieutenant Aponte? Because none of this evidence was submitted to the defense. This is possible exculpatory evidence being withheld from the defense. At the very least, I say it again, he deserves a new trial. From beginning to end, deserves a new trial. Now, Diana Campos said she saw Laci walking the dog. Mike Chiavata sees the dog and Laci. Multiple witnesses. Aponte tip says she confronted them. Another witness, Tom Harshon, saw a woman held outside a van by two men. Let me repeat that. A woman held outside the van by two men, looked like she was urinating. Now, what if Laci's water had broken due to the stress? What if Laci went into labor and had her baby? There's so many what ifs here because nobody followed up on the facts. They just ignored the facts. Now, the Laci sightings, the Aponte tip, never heard by the jury. Now, if all of this is true, Scott is on his way to the marina. We've got his timestamps at his office, right? I believe it's 10:30 a.m. I'd have to go back through my notes way back, but I'm pretty sure it's about, it's 10:30 a.m. So if Laci's seen at 10:45, Scott could not have done this. Scott could not have been on his computer at his office and make it out to the marina to get his launch ticket, his boat launch ticket. Not possible. So if these facts are true, which it seems like they are, then Scott could not have killed her. And none of this was heard by the jury. Okay? If the witnesses are to be believed, which they far outnumber the prosecution witnesses, then Scott could not have possibly done it. There's not enough time. It makes everything that the juror said about the time frame impossible. Now, another thing they did was the witness, the doctor, I don't know if you remember the doctor that said, there's one doctor said, on the 24th is when the, Connor died. And then another one said the 29th. Now, he did a size comparison to the ultrasound, the last ultrasound, to determine the date of death. Now, state says it was December 24th. This was highly criticized by the defense, but the defense doctor kind of raveled under pressure. Now, what they were criticizing is the guy used the wrong formula to measure the wrong bones to get the wrong date of death. Now, Dr. John T., who created the formula, discredited Dr. DeVore for using the wrong formula and not measuring 3 bones. He only did the femur. Now, Dr. John T., who wrote the formula, did it with the 3 bones you're supposed to use. So you're supposed to measure the femur, the humerus, and the tibia. So Dr. John T., creator of the formula that Dr. DeVore used incorrectly, went back and measured. Dr. John T. said it could have been that Connor could have been alive until January 3rd, not possible for the 24th. The femur, the tibia, the humerus had grown too much to put it on the 24th. And it fits the kidnapping narrative. It does not fit the Scott Peterson murder narrative. Now, there's the last piece is, the juror issue. Rachel Neese, they believe, snuck onto the jury. Now, Rachel had actually, Rochelle, sorry. Rochelle had actually put on her jury questionnaire that she had never been involved in any suit, any court proceedings, anything like that. Now, she said she didn't do this intentionally, because she just believed because a case that she was involved with had been dismissed or adjudicated that she didn't have to answer yes on that. Now, while she was pregnant, while Rochelle was 4.5 months pregnant, she had troubles with her ex and his girlfriend threatening her. So either she lied on the juror questionnaire, or she messed up, right? She didn't understand it. She claims to not even have thought about it, right? Intentional or not, it was misconduct. And she should have never been on the jury. And especially, this is the one that came straight into the jury room and say, okay, let's get this over with, and let's vote, and let's get this guy guilty right away. First thing she says when she comes into the room. And that's the one where they remove the juror, and less than 24 hours later, they've got a verdict. Sounds bizarre, and the underlying trauma that she's experienced definitely would inform her opinion. I know it would for me. So the media was essentially Scott's death nail. Everyone was out pushing their own self-interest. Everyone, like Nancy Grace, got a show. She got a show based on her coverage from this. Made millions and millions of dollars. Now, she didn't get paid to be on the Larry King show, but she eventually got her own show from this. And Nancy Grace actually said she was concerned that Scott would walk free. What? How about you be concerned that, maybe there's a fair trial going on here? That's what you should be concerned about as a legal professional and a legal analyst. That's what you should be concerned about. Now, I brought this up in the past, but there were jurors that would come on, like Larry King interviewed a juror, and he couldn't identify any facts about who, what, where, when, how, why, whatever. Couldn't. All they could identify was the why they thought Scott killed Lacey. They couldn't identify where it happened. They couldn't identify when it happened, how it happened. All they know is Scott did it, and here's why Scott did it, because he didn't want to have a family. It's just crazy. Now, it seemed like, at least initially, the media and the police were using the media to put pressure on Scott to confess. Now, Scott's strange actions obviously didn't help, but everything was all about his double life. Now, juror number 1 goes back and looks at it and says, look, I was caught up in the emotion with it. If I were to do things over, I wouldn't have voted for the death penalty. Well, if he went back and actually heard the facts over again without being caught up in the emotion of it, would he have voted guilty? Because they just scuttled anybody who had anything to say about the defense. Because there's always something you can point out about every single person to get anybody removed from any situation. Everybody has dirt. Everybody does something wrong. Period. In this story, everybody does something wrong. So if you want to, you can literally get any juror removed from a case. But the only jurors that they wanted to remove is anybody that had any doubts about whether or not Scott was guilty or innocent. Now, the family still clings to hope in the appellate process. And, it was so sad hearing the dad recount, what could Scott have contributed to society over these years? Forget losing Lacey and Connor. That is just terrible atrocity. But then if Scott is actually innocent, what could he have contributed to victims' rights? What could he have done to further the cause for Lacey, for justice? What could he have contributed to society? What could Lacey have contributed to society? What could Connor? Where would Connor be today? He's supposed to be born in 2003. Puts him 19 years old. He'd be in college. Where would Connor be today if he were alive? That's what I wonder. What would Lacey be doing? How many kids would they have had? Mark Aragos describes this as his greatest failure. The new attorney says, look, if I fail, it's on me and our justice system. Because I would have failed, and the justice system will have failed Scott because he's clearly not guilty. Sharon Roach is asked, during December, how are things during this time of the year? She says it is absolutely the worst time of the year. He said, is there ever a day that goes by where you don't think about her? She said, well, the real question is there ever a day where I don't cry? Because she thinks about her all day, every day. Which my heart is broken for Sharon. And for the Petersons, because they loved Lacey. Everybody loved Lacey. They all loved her. Scott lost his wife and his child. Now, I have a wife and a child, and I love them more than I could ever express. And to lose my wife and child would break me. I'd never recover from it. Now, regardless of who did it, how it was done, it's a tragedy, period. There's not much that has brought me to tears as far as true crime comes, but Lacey has that effect on me because she was such a wonderful, bright, shining example of a human being that was cut off too soon from this earth. Just a lovely person. And I do feel bad for Scott because if you actually look at all the evidence objectively, he didn't do it. He's not the murderer. And we need to get the people that murdered Lacey and stop persecuting Scott. We need to go after the right people. We need to look at the evidence again. We need to review it, and we need to take this seriously. And that's my greatest fear, is they're not taking this seriously enough. My fervent hope is that Scott will get a new trial, and at least the facts will be put out there in this case. Now, if there's more evidence that shows that Scott's guilty, look, I'll go along with that. But he deserves a fair trial, as well as do you, as well as do I. We all deserve a fair judicial system, an impartial judicial system, free from the media programming people what to believe, guilty, not guilty, so on and so forth. Everybody deserves the right to a fair, impartial jury. And I really think we need to make some changes here, because this media on demand that gets everything wrong most of the time because they're constantly competing for the story. rather than what's right and doing the right thing. This is Josh, True Crime Phenomenon, or Phenom of the Week. Scott Peterson. This is episode number 7, Reasonable Doubt. Please like, share, subscribe, comment below. I want to know if you think this is sufficient reasonable doubt. If everything I've told you here is true, don't believe me. Go research the material. Do the work. If all of this is true, how can Scott be guilty? If everything that I've brought to light is true, how can Scott possibly be guilty? It is not possible if you take an objective look at this. Now, like I said, there may be more evidence I missed, but I doubt it. I've spent a lot of time and a lot of episodes going through this, and I've got more coming. I've got 1, 2, probably 2 more, maybe 3, who knows? You know, this never-ending saga just keeps going and going and going for me. You know, I thought 3 episodes, maybe 4. And here we are on number 7, going on number 8, possibly number 9 and 10. You know, hopefully I can get it to that round number 10 and just, you know, kind of wrap it up there. I can always do follow-ups later if need be, but the more I look into this, the more sad it makes me. Please comment below. Let me know what you think. Like, share, subscribe, comment. It's Josh, True Crime Phenomenon, episode number 7, Reasonable Doubt. Scott Peterson, our Phenom of the Week. Thank you so much and have a wonderful week.